They say money can buy anything except anonymity from the internet. One crisp summer morning, billionaire industrialist David Harrington thought he'd scored the perfect getaway with a bewitching companion half his age. Sunlit waves shimmered behind them in an Instagram post he never dreamed would shatter his life. Within hours, a fiery storm of comments erupted, accusing the mysterious woman of being someone far more dangerous than she appeared. The rumors spiraled into a full-blown expose that threatened not just David's crumbling marriage, but also his image and legacy. In a single click, the world learned that secrets, no matter how well funded, rarely remain buried. David Harrington had always been a man who commanded attention the instant he walked into a room. At 6 feet 2 inches, with tailored suits that seemed to drape his athletic frame flawlessly, he radiated a polished self-assurance cultivated over decades of hard work and strategic gambles. Born in Chicago to a middle-class family, David displayed an early flair for numbers and negotiation. By the time he was in college, he'd already built 2 small businesses, one reselling refurbished laptops out of his dorm, and another importing artisanal leather wallets from Italy. He was a hustler in the best sense of the word, unrelenting in his pursuit of prosperity. When he turned 25, David took his biggest risk yet. He convinced an angel investor named Richard Carmichael, a man revered for his savvy in emerging markets, to pour $500,000 into a software automation startup David co-founded. It was an audacious move, especially in a market saturated with bigger, more established players. But David's persuasion worked. Within 18 months, the startup was acquired by a larger tech conglomerate, netting David his first major fortune. It was the start of an illustrious career that would see him founding or funding a series of successful ventures into technology, real estate, and even renewable energy. By his mid-30s, David Harrington was wealthy beyond imagination, yet his ambition burned brighter. He was rarely satisfied. Gone were the days of renting modest apartments and living on fast food. He now presided over a sprawling empire, complete with offices in New York, London, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. He jetted around the globe for business deals, indulging in the high-life trappings, private yachts membership at exclusive clubs, and a mansion perched atop the Hollywood Hills with a ski-line view that glittered like diamonds at night. But hidden beneath the aura of success was a restless void. He was married, yes, to the beautiful and accomplished Sarah Whitmore. They met at a charity event in Los Angeles, bonding over a shared passion for philanthropy. Sarah, an Ivy League-educated lawyer turned environmental activist, had grown up in a similarly middle-class background. She understood David's drive and matched him in intellect. For a while they seemed the ultimate power couple, publicly philanthropic, privately fierce in their love and ambitions. However, time and relentless pursuit of more money placed stress cracks in their marriage. David's constant travel, late-night negotiations, and if rumors were to be believed, unstoppable appetite for new experiences, all weighed heavily on Sarah. As David's orbit expanded, she found herself increasingly sidelined, overshadowed by the gravitational pull of his ambitions. Even the philanthropic causes they once championed together were neglected. David wrote the checks, but rarely bothered to attend the galas or volunteer events anymore. By the time he was in his early 40s, the heart of their relationship had eroded, replaced by polite tolerance and carefully orchestrated public appearances. That was the environment in which David would eventually make a series of decisions, culminating in the scandal that would rock his world. Fueled by ego and weary of the stale comfort his marriage had devolved into, he sought excitement elsewhere. He believed he was untouchable, convinced his well-oiled team of advisors and the iron curtain of wealth could conceal any indiscretions. But David Harrington was about to learn one of life's harshest truths in the digital era. Every secret has a lifespan. All it takes is a single post for an empire's pristine facade to come crashing down. Sarah Whitmore Harrington was no stranger to adversity. Raised by a single mother in a modest Chicago neighborhood, she thrived academically, eventually securing a full scholarship to Columbia University. While her classmates carried designer purses and took spring breaks in Europe, Sarah juggled part-time jobs at coffee shops and university libraries. She took pride in her self-reliance, never shying away from hard work and rigorous study. By her mid-20s, Sarah was practicing corporate law at a prestigious Manhattan firm. She was brilliant, resilient, and notably empathetic. Those qualities caught the attention of an internal pro bono committee, which led her to champion several environmental cases against big corporations. Her compassion for the underdog and her deep sense of justice made her a formidable foe in legal negotiations. She even won a high-profile lawsuit that forced a major chemical company to pay millions in damages to a marginalized community. The victory made headlines, and from that moment, Sarah became recognized not just as a skilled lawyer, but as a warrior for ethical responsibility. That was how she met David at a black tie fundraiser in Los Angeles, where he presented a sizable check to the environmental organization she represented. The sparks flew instantly. In him, she saw a titan with an innate gift for making money, and an equally fervent philanthropic side, an individual who could potentially reshape industries for the better. In her, he saw a steadfast spirit, beautiful both inside and out, and a partner whose intellect could match his. Their courtship was whirlwind. They dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, attended exclusive events, and traveled abroad to meet potential charity partners in places like Nairobi and Mumbai. Within 6 months, they were married in a lavish beach ceremony in Maui, complete with dignitaries, celebrities, and the who's who of venture capital in attendance. However, the transition from newlyweds to a stable marriage was rocky. David's businesses, spread across multiple sectors, demanded constant attention and travel. Meanwhile, Sarah transitioned from corporate law to running her own not-for-profit legal consultancy for environmental issues, an endeavor that required significant energy and focus. They saw each other less and less. The times they did manage to reconnect were overshadowed by David's phone calls, emails, and text notifications. Despite the cracks in their relationship, Sarah believed she still knew David better than anyone else. She sensed when he was exhausted, recognized when his bravado was merely a cover for deeper anxieties. She also recognized as his success soared to new heights that he was falling into certain patterns, seeking novelty, losing interest in things that once mattered, constantly pushing boundaries. But she never quite dared to voice her growing suspicions. She wanted to preserve their public image, and more critically, she didn't want to face the reality that her husband might be cheating. Then the subtle shifts started. David became secretive about his phone, quickly changing screens when she walked by. He started going on business trips to places that made no sense, or at times that were uncharacteristic for the industries he worked in. Once Sarah found a diamond bracelet in his study desk, one that was clearly not for her, as she had never once expressed interest in that style, nor had he gifted her something similar in years. She brushed it off, attributing it to a possible gift for a female investor or sponsor. But deep down, she suspected. Sarah thought about confronting him multiple times, yet her pride held her back. In her mind, relationships were built on honesty and trust, but confronting David without proof felt like a betrayal of her self-respect. She wanted certainty. She needed to be sure. In the quiet corners of her soul, she wondered if it might be easier to look away, to focus on her philanthropic work, and to let David chase his illusions. After all, they maintained a semblance of stability. They weren't short on money. Her beloved mother was comfortable living in a gorgeous townhouse that Sarah and David financed. On the surface, her life seemed perfect. But as the months rolled on, Sarah felt a gathering storm, an anxiety that gnawed at her. Something in her marriage and David was shifting. For all her accomplishments, for all her unwavering character, she was powerless to stop whatever was happening. A sense of impending disaster loomed. She could almost hear the faint thunderclap on the horizon. She just didn't know how or when it would strike, only that it was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. David Harrington first laid eyes on Layla St. James at a private art exhibit in Soho. The event was one of those exclusive gatherings of the ultra-wealthy and avant-garde, a place to see and be seen. She stood in front of a painting, a swirl of neon colors, something abstract and disorienting, and seemed lost in thought. She wore a simple yet elegant emerald green dress, her tawny hair falling in loose waves down her back. David was immediately intrigued by her aura of quiet confidence. He approached her fully expecting that easy spark he often found in conversations. Layla, however, surprised him. She greeted him with polite warmth, but spoke with a self-assuredness and intellectual depth that caught him off guard. She was not overly impressed by his status or money. At least she didn't show it in the usual fawning way. Instead, she asked him questions about his philanthropic endeavors, referencing a literacy program in Southeast Asia that David's foundation had once funded. Few people outside his close circle even knew about that. It was an obscure project, overshadowed by his more flashy contributions. Fascinated by her knowledge, he pressed further. Layla revealed she was an art historian by training, had worked in Europe's auction circuit, and recently moved to New York to pursue her own gallery aspirations. She claimed she had grown tired of the pretentiousness in traditional art circles and wanted to start a space that embraced both established and emerging artists. Over a cocktail in the exhibit's VIP lounge, Layla recounted travel stories from her time in Paris, how she'd negotiated million-dollar deals for rare impressionist works. Her voice dripped with a delicate, almost musical accent. David couldn't quite place a mix, she said, from traveling around the world. In the weeks that followed, they exchanged numbers. David found himself texting Layla at odd hours, discussing art-world politics and eventually drifting into flirtation. Layla reciprocated, sprinkling their conversations with subtle compliments and innuendo that kept David on his toes. It felt like a dance one that David had not experienced in a long time. Sarah had once been his intellectual equal, but now their discussions were overshadowed by property deals, lawsuits, and superficial gatherings. Layla offered something new, something fresh. Their first real date came under the guise of a business meeting at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Midtown. David told himself he was merely exploring philanthropic collaboration, maybe funding an art initiative Layla had proposed. But by dessert, they were lost in each other's eyes. A wave of guilt threatened to crash over David, but he quelled it with a glass of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, rationalizing that he deserved happiness. Life was too short, and he had worked too hard. If he couldn't indulge once in a while, what was the point of all this success? Days turned into weeks, and he found every excuse to see Layla. A hotel suite at the Pierre, a weekend in the Hamptons. David claimed he had an urgent real estate matter to attend to. Layla was always there, radiant, engaging, confident in her allure. But there was something else about her, a certain mystery that David couldn't pinpoint. She rarely spoke about her family or past relationships. She was cagey whenever he asked about the specifics of her work in Europe. His curiosity was piqued, but the thrill of their clandestine encounters overshadowed any red flags. In private moments, Layla would talk about the future, teasing a world where they might be more public in their romance. David smiled, uncertain if he could ever cross that line. He was still tethered by a marriage that he had not fully admitted was over. Yet Layla's world was intoxicating and like a moth drawn to flame. He ignored the risk. The more David's desire grew, the more brazen he became about their affair. Eventually, a reckless idea took shape in his mind. He had a beachside villa in Belize that was rarely used. Perhaps a little tropical escape was just what they needed. Sun, sand, and secrecy far from prying eyes. Layla loved the idea, squealing with excitement at the notion of turquoise waters and private cabanas. They decided on a date, making hush-hush travel plans through David's private jet. In David's mind, this was a contained fantasy, a secret paradise sealed away from the rest of his life. No one would ever know. They would be safe to indulge, if only for a few days. He should have remembered that secrets don't stay buried forever. And with social media's insatiable appetite for drama, a single misstep could set off a chain reaction he'd never see coming. The villa in Belize was a pristine haven surrounded by palm trees, with a private stretch of powdery white sand extending into azure waters. It was the kind of place people only see in glossy travel magazines, one David rarely got to enjoy, thanks to his busy schedule. Layla's eyes sparkled when they arrived. She ran to the ocean's edge, letting the warm waves lap at her feet. David watched her heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Somewhere in the recesses of his conscience, a small voice asked, "Is this worth it?" He silenced it, enticed by the vision of Layla on the beach. Each morning they lounged under canopied daybeds, sipping tropical cocktails and listening to the rhythmic crash of waves. David felt more alive than he had in years. He indulged in Layla's laughter, her spontaneous dances in the sand, the ways she made him forget about corporate boardrooms and stifling responsibilities. This was freedom, no obligations, no routine, just the two of them enjoying life's simple pleasures. On the second day, after a lazy breakfast of fresh mangoes and coffee, Layla teased David with a challenge. "Let's take a picture, something special to remember this trip by." David hesitated. He had always maintained a strict no social media posts policy when it came to his private affairs. But the sunlight was dancing off the ocean, and Layla looked radiant in her turquoise bikini. She draped herself across a beach lounger, beckoning him closer. David relented, pulling out his phone. He snapped a few pictures of them together. Layla's head on his chest, the glimmering ocean behind them. Laughing, they flipped through the shots, choosing their favorites. Layla posted a couple of photos on her own discreet account set to private. She had only a handful of followers, mostly art world acquaintances, she said. David shrugged, telling himself that a handful of people with no ties to his life wouldn't make a difference. Still, he felt a pang of anxiety at the possibility of any slip. Emboldened by the day's carefree vibe, David grew reckless. Late that evening, after a lavish dinner prepared by the villa's private chef, Layla pressed herself against him and giggled. "Let's show off just a bit. Let's make them jealous." She grabbed his phone and teased him with an Instagram story post. "Just a quick shot of the sunset," she said, with a silhouette of them toasting wine glasses. She promised it wouldn't give away too much. "No faces, no location tags," she whispered. Caught up in the evening's romantic intoxication, David acquiesced. He posted it. The immediate response from his followers was mild people admired the sunset, the luxurious atmosphere. But within minutes, eagle-eyed fans began to notice small details, the shape of a woman's figure in the reflection of the glass door, the second wine glass in David's hand. A few commented, enjoying a romantic getaway. David, others posted heart emojis and asked, "Where's Sarah?" That was the first red flag. David ignored it, telling himself it was harmless speculation. The next morning, in a haze of euphoria, David made a grave mistake. While Layla was frolicking in the waves, he snapped a candid shot of her, capturing her face in profile, then posted it to his main feed with a cryptic caption, "A moment of peace in paradise." He truly believed it was ambiguous enough that no one would identify her. He never tagged her account, never mentioned her name. But the internet has a way of connecting the dots. Within minutes, the post garnered thousands of likes. Then came the comments, some supportive, many curious, a few, laced with suspicion. A handful of David's close friends texted him directly. "Who is she?" Some used winking emojis, half joking. Others were more direct, worried that this could blow back on him if Sarah saw it. Unperturbed, David turned off his phone notifications, wanting to stay in their bubble of paradise a little while longer. It was on the final day of their trip that reality began to intrude. Unbeknownst to David, a tabloid blogger had recognized Layla's face from a rumor that had circulated in certain high society circles, an art dealer with a dubious past, rumored to seduce wealthy clients, rumored to have left Europe under a cloud of scandal. The blogger had ties to gossip circles across the globe and had access to hush-hush sources in the European art scene. By the time David and Layla boarded his private jet for the return flight to New York, the blogger was already working on an exposé cross-referencing images and combing through digital footprints. The seeds of disaster were planted, and neither David nor Layla had any clue that a social media storm was brewing. They touched down in New York that evening, stepping back into a world that would soon turn on them with alarming speed. For David, the beach vacation was a blissful memory. For the internet, it became the catalyst for a scandal that would reshape everything he thought he knew about his mistress, his marriage, and even himself. When David checked his phone after landing, he noticed a barrage of missed calls and frantic texts, primarily from his closest business associates and his public relations officer, Jacqueline Nguyen. His heart pounded as he glanced at the notifications. Typically, such a flurry of calls indicated a major development, a collapsed deal, maybe a crisis in one of his overseas offices. But as he skimmed through them, he realized the panic was personal, not professional. "David, call me ASAP." One text from Jacqueline read, "We have a problem on Instagram." Confused and apprehensive, he dialed Jacqueline's number. She picked up immediately, her voice strained. "David, you need to delete that post right now," she blurted before he could speak. "Calm down, Jackie." He attempted trying to maintain composure. "What's going on?" She launched into a rapid-fire explanation. "Your post with that woman on the beach." Someone recognized her. Comments are exploding. There's a rumor swirling that she's a con artist who allegedly scammed an art collector in Paris. People are sharing screenshots, old articles, everything. It's going viral. They're calling her the art world grifter. This is beyond just an affair rumor. This could turn into a full-blown scandal. David's head spun. He had braced himself for gossip about a potential mistress, but allegations of criminal activity took the situation to an entirely different level. He ended the call immediately, opened Instagram, and gaped at the flood of comments. Many asked, Is that Layla St. James? Others claimed she was wanted for questioning in Europe. Some linked to half-baked investigative pieces from obscure blogs. And then there were the moral judgments, David Harrington. How could you cheat on your wife with a criminal respect lost? Hypocrite. A real philanthropist wouldn't be with a con artist. Layla, who was seated beside him in his chauffeured car, scrolled through her own phone. He could see the color drain from her face. "David, we need to talk," she whispered, voice shaky. Not willing to address the situation in the car, he texted his driver to head to one of his discreet penthouse properties in Manhattan. He couldn't go home to his mansion. Sarah was likely there, and a confrontation now would be disastrous. Layla's expression was that of panic fused with indignation. "I don't understand why they're saying these things," she kept muttering. "I'm not a criminal." She tried to show him what she claimed were legitimate references from her past employers, though David barely glanced at them. Once they arrived at the penthouse, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Layla collapsed onto a plush sofa. David paced phone in hand, reading through messages from colleagues, PR consultants, and even lawyers. His empire was built on a carefully curated image of competence and ethics. Any hint of scandal could harm investor confidence. And the fact that Sarah, widely respected in legal and philanthropic circles, might soon find out, was another ticking bomb. "I need you to tell me everything," David demanded, voice taut with urgency. "Why are people calling you a grifter? Were you accused of something in Europe? Tell me now, Layla." She exhaled, trembling. "I never scammed anyone. I was involved with a wealthy French collector. Yes, but I left because he was controlling and abusive. He spread rumors about me to cover his tracks. I never faced any charges. None of it is true." David studied her, trying to gauge the sincerity of her words. He had believed her wholeheartedly until this moment, but now his instincts sounded alarms. Something in her eyes. Was it fear, or was it guilt? The swirling chaos of the moment made it hard to read. A sense of betrayal and dread took hold of him. He realized that even if Layla was innocent, the public didn't care. Gossip and scandal had already latched onto them. The internet feeds on controversy, and they had served it up on a silver platter. The damage might already be done. Over the next few hours, David's crisis management team mobilized. He engaged his top-notch legal counsel, pressing them to craft a statement denying any criminal association. Jacqueline orchestrated a digital damage control strategy, locking down comments, removing the offending post, and issuing official disclaimers that any claims about Layla's criminal background were unsubstantiated rumors. But the internet had already taken screenshots. The post lived on in countless retweets and reshares. Worse still, the mainstream media was picking it up now. A celebrity gossip show ran a segment featuring the blurred-out images of David and Layla on the beach with a dramatic voiceover billionaire, David Harrington's rumored mistress, international con artist, or misunderstood muse. Speculative headlines mushroomed across tabloids, often accompanied by pictures of Sarah, his wronged wife, looking stoic and poised at past charity events. On top of everything, phone calls from Sarah began lighting up David's screen. He couldn't bring himself to answer. His mind whirled in panic, trying to figure out how to spin this. He composed text after text to Sarah, erasing them before sending any. There was no easy way to explain. Perhaps the best he could do was beg for her forgiveness and attempt some sort of damage limitation. David, Layla said softly, breaking the tense silence. "I need you to believe me. I'm not who they say I am." He looked at her, swallowing the lump in his throat. "We'll figure this out." He managed, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. But the question that truly haunted him was, had he been duped? And if so, was it just by a cunning seductress, or also by his own naive desire for excitement and novelty? The answer wouldn't remain hidden for long. The internet had taken hold of this scandal, and soon even darker revelations would surface, forcing David to confront secrets far more devastating than an affair. While David and Layla tried to contain the inferno in Manhattan, Sarah Harrington was at home, feeling as though the ground had opened beneath her feet. Initially, she had ignored the handful of texts from friends, hinting at David's suspicious Instagram post. She was used to rumors. But then her best friend, Monica Alvarez, sent a message that rattled her. "Please check the tabloids." "I'm so sorry, Sarah." With shaky hands, Sarah clicked a link Monica had forwarded. She saw David's Instagram post, the silhouette of a woman on a beach, and the avalanche of salacious comments and allegations. Her first reaction was numbness, an eerie calm that spread through her limbs. She had suspected David might be unfaithful, but seeing it unfold publicly was a different kind of pain. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. It was her mother, distressed and confused about the swirling rumors. Embarrassment flooded Sarah, a hot flush crawling up her cheeks. She assured her mother she was fine, even though her heart felt as if it were cracking in half. She forced herself to remain steady, telling her mother not to believe everything she read online. But the numbness soon gave way to anger, then heartbreak, then an odd sense of relief. At least now the rumors were in the open. No more doubts, no more illusions. She spent the next few hours pacing the living room, rereading old messages from David, analyzing their marriage from every angle. She felt a mixture of betrayal and odd detachment, as though she were hovering above herself, watching it all unfold from a distance. A short while later, David's chauffeur arrived at the mansion, dropping off a large black envelope. Sarah took it, opened it, and found legal documents inside, some half-baked statements from David's attorneys, disclaimers about the alleged mistress's background, and an apologetic note that ended with, "Please do not speak to the press. I will explain everything." There was no real apology, no admission of guilt. Just corporate-sounding instructions. It was like receiving a memo from a CEO to a subordinate, rather than a heartfelt message from a husband to his wife. Furious, she called David multiple times, but each attempt went to voicemail. She left a single message. "You owe me an explanation. David, I'm not some PR problem to be handled." Then she hung up, refusing to try again. That evening, as she attempted to navigate the swirling confusion, she received another unexpected visitor. Michael Whitmore, her cousin and fellow attorney, who also worked for a prestigious Los Angeles firm. Michael was in New York on business and had seen the online furore. He arrived unannounced, a supportive presence Sarah desperately needed. They sat in the living room, the mansion feeling too large, too grand for the gloom enveloping it. Sarah poured them both glasses of wine, her hands trembling ever so slightly. She recounted the situation, her suspicions, the damning Instagram post, the rumors about the mistress's criminal past. She felt exposed, humiliated. Michael listened patiently, asking pointed questions. "So this woman Layla might be a con artist," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "Do we know if it's true?" Sarah shrugged. "I don't know anything anymore. I thought I knew David, but now I'm not so sure." Michael offered a thoughtful nod. "Look, Sarah, I can help you. Legally. We can figure out your options, whether it's a separation, a divorce, or simply negotiations for your protection. You shouldn't trust his attorneys. They'll protect him first." Sarah sighed, leaning back into the sofa's cushions. "I appreciate that, but I need time to think. My marriage is on the line, and if this woman really is dangerous, I don't want to rush into any decisions I'll regret." Michael placed his hand over hers. "I understand. But be cautious. Men like David with power and money can become unpredictable under pressure. Do what you must to protect yourself emotionally, legally, financially." That night, Sarah tried to sleep, but nightmares plagued her images of David and Layla on a beach swirling tabloids and faceless gossipers pointing fingers at her. The next morning, she decided she wouldn't be silent. If David wouldn't provide clarity, she would find it on her own. She scheduled a meeting with her own legal advisors, ignoring the suggestion in David's letter to remain quiet. She reached out to her charitable partners, confirming that she would continue her activism work, regardless of the scandal. The last thing she needed was for her philanthropic efforts to be overshadowed by her husband's affair. Amid the emotional turmoil, a flicker of her old resolve appeared. Sarah refused to let David's betrayal define her. If anything, it fortified her determination. If the woman in the scandal truly was a con artist, Sarah intended to expose the lies. And if the rumors were false, she would force David to explain why he had put her through this mortifying ordeal. From that point on, Sarah began her own quiet investigation. Friends in the art world, acquaintances in legal networks across Europe, she reached out to anyone who might have a lead on Layla St. James. She had no illusions that discovering the truth would fix her marriage, but at least she wouldn't be a passive spectator to her own humiliation. Little did she know her search for answers would set off the next wave of revelations, drawing her into a labyrinth of secrets deeper and more twisted than she could have ever imagined. Back at David's penthouse, tension hung in the air like a stagnant fog. Layla paced the living room, her phone constantly buzzing with text messages and calls. She ignored most, focusing instead on David, who was huddled over his laptop in a makeshift war room arrangement with his PR team via video conference. The official statements they had released weren't silencing the rumors. If anything, the chatter online seemed to grow louder, especially on niche art world forums. Jacqueline's voice crackled through the laptop speakers. "David, we have to address these allegations head-on. We found some references to Layla's possible involvement with a French collector named Jean-Louis Moreau. He's rumored to have lost a significant sum purchasing forgeries from an unknown intermediary, someone described as an attractive American woman. Some people are linking that story to Layla. We need to refute this or confirm it." "Refute it?" Layla interjected, indignation flaring in her eyes. "It's a smear campaign by a bitter ex. I've told David this already." David sighed. "Do we have any evidence that you didn't do these things?" "Layla." "Something official? Legal documents proving your innocence?" She glowered, crossing her arms. "I never faced formal charges. That's all the proof I have." Jacqueline's voice softened. "That's not enough for the court of public opinion. They want something concrete." With a heavy sigh, David ended the call, promising to regroup later. He turned to face Layla, who was hugging herself defensively. "I need the truth," he said quietly. "I'm not accusing you, but if there's any detail you left out, I need to know." Her eyes flickered. Then she told him her story. Layla claimed she had indeed worked with Jean-Louis Moreau, one of France's most influential collectors, who hired her to help him scout and acquire valuable pieces. According to Layla, Jean-Louis was arrogant and manipulative, eventually pressuring her into a toxic affair. As she tried to distance herself professionally and personally, Jean-Louis began to sabotage her reputation, planting rumors of forgery and fraud. Layla insisted she had zero involvement in any wrongdoing and fled Europe after receiving threats from Jean-Louis' associates. She'd been attempting to rebuild her life in New York, severing all ties with that dark chapter. David listened, half wanting to believe her. The story was plausible enough. Rich men had used their influence to destroy someone's reputation before. But a nagging doubt remained. Layla was still omitting details. "What about the rumors you drugged him and stole money?" David asked, referencing a particularly sensational claim circulating online. Her cheeks reddened. Utter lies. Fabricated. "I don't do drugs. I hardly even drink. I've never stolen a cent from anyone in my life. Don't you see, he's punishing me because I left him." David studied her trembling lip, the tears welling in her eyes. He wanted to comfort her, to accept her story at face value. But the stakes were too high. His empire was in jeopardy, and if Layla was hiding something, the fallout could be catastrophic. Yet the thought of losing her, the excitement she brought into his life, filled him with dread. So he decided to proceed cautiously, choosing to believe her for the moment, but resolved to do his own thorough checks. He called in favors from private investigators he had used in corporate deals. Within hours, they began scouring European legal records, court documents, and any traces of Layla's past, all while David prepared for the next wave of media scrutiny. The scandal showed no signs of abating. Then, in a surprising twist, David's phone rang with a call from none other than Jean-Louis Moreau himself. A few months prior, David had made casual acquaintance with Moreau at a Monaco charity event. Now the French collector was reaching out directly, presumably, to discuss the fiasco. With Layla fidgeting nervously nearby, David accepted the call. On speaker, Jean-Louis' accented voice flowed smoothly. "Ah, Monsieur Harrington. I see we have a common acquaintance." David cleared his throat. "Apparently so. I'd like to get to the bottom of this. You're aware of the rumors?" A condescending chuckle crackled over the speaker. "Rumors, yes. But they are not rumors, monsieur. The woman you call Layla St. James, if that's her real name, defrauded me. She introduced me to forged artwork, manipulated me emotionally, then disappeared with large commissions. I have evidence. I attempted legal action, but she slipped away." Layla blanched, shaking her head vehemently at David. David pressed. "She claims you invented these lies because she ended a personal relationship with you." A harsh laugh erupted from Jean-Louis. "Personal relationship? She seduced me for one purpose, to gain access to my network and my finances. I warn you, Harrington, this is a dangerous woman. She is skilled at deception. If you continue to involve yourself with her, your name, your empire, both will burn." The call ended abruptly. Layla broke into tears, insisting Jean-Louis was lying, that he was the manipulator. David stood there, torn. On one hand, he despised Jean-Louis's smug tone and recognized how men of power often rewrite history to blame women. On the other, the man's conviction was chilling. Could it all be true? David's private investigators would soon deliver a preliminary report, but the emotional stakes were skyrocketing. If Layla was innocent, David would stand by her. If she was guilty, he risked his fortune, his reputation, everything. And all the while, Sarah loomed in the background, her silence perhaps more threatening than any media outlet. That night, David slept fitfully plagued by dreams of forging art and forging love, unable to discern which illusions were real. Little did he know the truth would be more complicated and more shocking than he could ever anticipate. By the following morning, David's investigators had sent a cryptic message. "We have substantial findings. Meeting recommended." He arranged for them to come to the penthouse, carefully scheduling it when Layla would be out. She had departed earlier to clear her head, though David wondered if she was actually meeting someone else. Just after noon, 2 stoic men in suits arrived, introducing themselves as Morgan Harris and Philip Zhao. David led them into the study, shutting the door behind them. Their expressions were grim. Morgan began. "Mr. Harrington, we've identified 2 separate legal dockets in Paris and Brussels that involve an American woman with a similar profile to Ms. St. James. The name used was not Layla St. James, but Linda McPherson." Same initials, L.M. Philip continued. "The charges were dropped in one case and settled out of court in another. Both involved allegations of art fraud and misrepresentation. The documents list an unidentified male accomplice." David leaned forward, his pulse pounding. "Are we sure this is the same woman?" Morgan nodded. "We have a 78% facial recognition match between photos from archived news articles and the images you provided us of Ms. St. James. A strong likelihood it's her." A nauseating dread coursed through David's veins. "Any sign of Jean-Louis Moreau's involvement?" Philip replied. "He's mentioned in the Brussels docket as a complaining witness. The details were sealed, but we suspect a settlement was reached behind closed doors." David sank into his chair, his mind a kaleidoscope of betrayal and rage. He thought of confronting Layla, but a text on his phone interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Unknown number. If you want to keep certain secrets from your wife and the public, it'll cost you $5 million. Wire instructions to follow." Accompanying the text was a single photograph, a candid shot of David and Layla in an intimate moment on the Belize beach, far more revealing than anything posted on social media. Clearly, someone had been photographing them. The angle suggested a drone or a long-range camera. And now they wanted money. David clenched his jaw. "I'm being blackmailed," he growled, showing Morgan and Philip the text. They exchanged worried looks, cautioning David not to make any hasty moves. This could be linked to Ms. St. James's alleged accomplice, Morgan offered. "We've seen this pattern before." Seething, David dismissed them. He needed a plan. A quiet hush money payment would only encourage more extortion down the line. Yet ignoring the threat could lead to even greater exposure. And the worst part was the growing suspicion that Layla herself might be part of this scheme, another elaborate con. But a flicker of doubt lingered. Perhaps Layla truly was a victim, and her old accomplice was extorting them both. He decided he needed to corner Layla that very evening. No more half-truths or evasion. He wanted her entire story. If she lied or faltered, he'd cut her off and let the legal system do its worst. But if she persuaded him of her innocence, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could face this together. Hours later, Layla returned. David wasted no time. "We need to talk," he said curtly, leading her into the study. She looked apprehensive, eyes darting to the closed door. He showed her the blackmail text and the incriminating photo. He then presented the investigative report, the name Linda McPherson, the out-of-court settlements. With every piece of information, Layla's face paled further. When he finished, an uneasy silence settled. Layla's lips quivered. Then she began to speak, voice trembling. "I'm not Linda McPherson. That was my sister." A new tale spilled forth, each revelation more shocking than the last. Layla insisted she had a twin sister raised separately after a messy divorce in her childhood. The sister was the one who got entangled with Jean-Louis, forging art and leveraging Layla's identity. Layla claimed she tried to help her sister out of the mess, but it spiraled beyond control. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I fled to America to escape that chaos. My sister threatened to drag me down with her. I changed my name legally to distance myself from her record. David, I swear I've never defrauded anyone. I thought you'd never understand, so I kept it hidden. David's mind reeled. The idea of a twin, a doppelganger who could have orchestrated these crimes, sounded outrageous, but not impossible. Layla sobbed, claiming her sister was the blackmailer, the one who had been snapping secret photos and demanding money. She's punishing me for leaving her behind, for not bailing her out again. The story was so elaborate, so twisted. David's gut wrenched with conflicting emotions. The puzzle pieces fit a little too well, yet Layla's tears seemed genuine. He remembered how she had always been vague about her family, how frightened she seemed whenever he asked about her past. Could this all be real? Wrestling with his doubts, David found himself making a decision based on a precarious blend of logic and emotion. If what you're saying is true, we need proof, he said, voice stern. We'll involve my investigators. We'll find your sister, and we'll end this blackmail. Layla nodded, relieved. Whatever it takes. I'll do anything. A fragile truce formed between them that night. David, driven by a potent mix of fear, pride, and infatuation, chose to believe Layla at least temporarily. He vowed to protect her from the blackmailer, from the swirling rumors, from everything. Yet in the darkness of the penthouse, as Layla slept fitfully in the next room, David stared out the window at the glowing city lights, wondering if he'd just made the greatest mistake of his life. While David grappled with the twin sister revelation, Sarah conducted her own inquiry, determined to uncover the truth about Layla St. James. Through her legal network, she managed to contact a renowned French attorney named René Fournier, who had once handled a high-profile art fraud case involving Jean-Louis Moreau. Via a series of lengthy email exchanges, Sarah pieced together a confounding puzzle. According to René, there had indeed been an American woman at the center of the Moreau scandal. Someone who used multiple aliases, among them Linda and Layla. Official documents were sealed, but rumors suggested the woman had an accomplice, possibly a family member. René also hinted that the entire fiasco nearly extended into a broader European crime syndicate. But before any formal charges could stick, the woman vanished. Moreau had enough influence to keep the scandal out of mainstream news, presumably to save face. But the rumor mill churned relentlessly behind closed doors. Sarah's instincts told her that David's mistress had some connection to that case, but she wanted concrete proof. She scrolled through obscure websites, reading half-legible Google translations of French tabloids, looking for any mention of sisters or twins. Then she stumbled on a small blog post from years ago that mentioned a sibling duo suspected of art forgery, one rumored to be involved with Moreau. The post cited no official documents, but the narrative was eerily similar to Layla's story. Frustrated, yet fueled by this partial validation, Sarah pressed further. She reached out to an old law school acquaintance in Brussels, who was now a mid-level judicial clerk. Within a day, the acquaintance confirmed that sealed records existed involving a Linda Macpherson, but he couldn't access details without risking his career. He did, however, confirm the mention of a sister in the sealed complaint. Sarah found herself at a crossroads. Layla might indeed have a twin, a partner in crime, or a separate individual entirely. Either possibility spelled trouble for David, and by extension, Sarah. If Layla had roped David into a blackmail scheme, the scandal could destroy his reputation and the philanthropic work Sarah herself cherished. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in an even more unexpected way. Late one afternoon, Sarah received a cryptic text from a number labeled Unknown. Meet me at the Green Leaf Cafe on 5th. I have information about Layla. Come alone. A friend. Wary of a trap. Sarah nearly ignored it, but curiosity and a desire to protect herself compelled her to go. She arrived at the cafe, a cozy, dimly lit space, scanning the patrons nervously. A tall, lean man in a baseball cap stood and waved her over. As she approached, he took off the cap, revealing salt and pepper hair. She recognized him vaguely from a magazine cover, Jean-Louis Moreau. Her heart hammered as she sat down, unsure how to proceed. Moreau spoke first, his English tinged with a delicate accent. Mrs. Harrington, thank you for coming. I apologize for the clandestine approach, but we share a common predicament. She regarded him with cold caution. You claim to have information about Layla St. James. His lips curled into a faint smile. Or Linda McPherson, or whatever she calls herself these days. Sarah's breath caught. So it's true. Moreau leaned in. I contacted your husband, but he seems enamored by her. Or perhaps she's convinced him of a sob story. Either way, he is not receptive. But you, Mrs. Harrington, you have more at stake if this escalates further. He slid an envelope across the table. Sarah opened it to find printed emails, photographs, documents linking Layla to a series of art deals with suspicious authenticity. One photo showed a woman identical to Layla holding hands with a second woman, a near doppelganger. Another picture captured them in front of a Belgian art gallery, rumored to deal in forgeries. The timestamps suggested these were from a few years ago. Proof of her partnership with her twin, who is equally cunning. Moreau explained. They swindled me and they swindled others. I want them both to face justice. But your husband is in the way, blindly protecting her. Sarah felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, bitterness, heartbreak, and a strange sense of vindication. Part of her wanted to lash out at David. Part of her wanted to pity him. She also wondered what Moreau expected from her. Moreau eyed her. I need your help. Influence your husband to break ties with her. If he continues to shield her, she will only drag him further into the mud. And I suspect her sister lurks in the shadows, planning something bigger. Perhaps the blackmail we are hearing about Sarah, swallowed hard. What do you get out of this? His brow furrowed. Closure, justice, and the chance to salvage what's left of my reputation in Europe. Also a certain moral satisfaction in knowing these sisters don't dupe anyone else. They parted ways with a tense handshake. Sarah clutched the envelope as if it were a time bomb. Her marriage had been on the brink of collapse, but this new knowledge gave her a sense of responsibility. She had to warn David, if only to protect him from sinking deeper into a catastrophic scandal. She also felt a measure of compassion. Despite his betrayal, David was still the man she once loved, and no matter how furious she felt, she didn't want him ruined by these manipulations. That night she found herself driving to David's penthouse, not entirely sure how she would approach the subject. The envelope of evidence sat on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. She thought of all the ways this meeting could go. Would David believe her? Would Layla be there spitting venom at Sarah's intrusion? One thing was certain: the next steps she took could determine the fate of both their futures and possibly save David from the greatest betrayal of his life. Sarah arrived at David's penthouse just after dusk, her nerves taut with urgency. The doorman let her in, without question. As she stepped off the private elevator, she found David pacing the living room phone clutched in hand. He froze when he saw her guilt, relief, and dread flashing across his face. "Sarah," he began. She raised a hand. "I know everything. I'm here to stop you from making a terrible mistake." Without another word, she extended the envelope Jean-Louis Moreau had given her. David took it, flipped through its contents, photographs of Layla and her twin emails, detailing suspicious art deals and banking documents that hinted at blackmail. His face tightened with disbelief. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. "From Moreau," Sarah said. "He claims Layla and her sister ran a sophisticated art scam, and now she's entangled you in it." David looked stunned. "Layla told me her sister set her up, that she's the victim here." "She also told you she'd be honest with investigators," Sarah countered. "Did she ever show you this?" She pointed to a photo of Layla and her sister, exchanging a thick envelope, both smiling. Before David could reply, Layla stepped out of a side room. Her hair was tousled, her eyes burning. "You're working with that man, Sarah. That manipulative monster." Sarah didn't flinch. "You've been hiding too much. If you're innocent, prove it. I was trying to protect David." Layla cried. "My sister threatened us both. I didn't plan to fall in love, but I did." Everything changed. Before David could react, Layla's phone buzzed. She paled, then bolted toward her bag. Her belongings spilled across the floor, lipstick's wallet and a folded note. Sarah snatched it up. "Swiss wire transfer instructions," she read aloud. "Is this your sister's next payment?" Layla's defenses crumbled. I was going to handle it. I didn't want David dragged through this. "So you'd rather pay hush money than tell the truth?" Sarah's voice was tight with disgust. David stared at Layla, torn between fury and heartbreak. "You told me we were into this together, but you lied again. I had to." Layla shouted, tears streaming. "I knew if you doubted me, you'd walk away." David's face hardened. "And now I just might." The room fell into tense silence. Then quietly, David picked up his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, dialing. "Let them figure out who's lying." Layla lunged for the phone, but Sarah stepped in her way. A moment later, the call connected. The decision was made. Sirens approached in the distance. Layla collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Sarah turned away, fighting back tears of her own, of betrayal, loss, and something like pity. The truth would unravel in the days to come. Investigators would trace the blackmail, expose the twins' identity, and sort through Layla's involvement. David's public image would take a hit, but it would survive. Whether his marriage did only time would tell. But for now, the storm outside mirrored the one within, and none of their lives would ever be the same. Betrayal, scandal, and secret identities. This story proves that even the most powerful among us can be undone by hidden truths. In the end, David Harrington learned the hard way that wealth and influence can't shield you from the consequences of deception. Sarah, despite her heartbreak, found renewed strength in confronting the lies head-on rather than remaining a silent victim. As for Layla or Linda, her fate was sealed by the very illusions she spun, reminding us that the truth always finds a way to surface. if you were captivated by the twists, betrayals, and dramatic showdowns in this real-life saga. Help us shine more light on stories that need to be told. Like this video, share it with friends who love jaw-dropping drama, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can unravel even more astonishing tales lurking behind the polished veneers of the rich and the restless,